Hello everybody, welcome back to the Jerbee Apiary. It's time to restock those hives. Interestingly enough, two of the hives completely absconded. That was the cathedral hive and one of the Layens hives. The other three hives, they just had complete dead out, had a lot of resources, were able to harvest the honey, especially because I wasn't using chemicals, and all the honey that was left over then in the brood chambers and otherwise were still good, viable, usable honey for human consumption. So I guess pros and cons to not treating. I heard a lot of people actually had trouble this past winter, so I guess I'm not alone on this one. I'm gonna look into maybe some non-chemical alternatives for mite treatment, since I'm trying to avoid the oxalic acid and the other kind of treatments that are out there. We'll see how those go this year. Always good to experiment and try something new.
To help protect the entrances from mostly weather and rain, I decided to put some rain visors over top of the hives this year, which came out okay. And the next steps then were to just prepare the hives overall for the package installs. I decided to also get some wire and pre-wire the frame that I'm going to connect the queen cage to, just to save a little bit of time of having the queen cage out and having the bee boxes open. The three packages I got this year were all Italian bees that were from Draper's Super Bees. I believe they were brought up to upstate New York from Georgia. And it's always a matter of using your hive tool or other device and to pry open all the different parts to get the bee boxes separated from one another, to get the sugar water can out of there. This one was a little bit tricky. I had to pull on it with some pliers. And then you're able to get the queen cage, which is suspended inside of the bee box, out of there. And you can see there it is a pink dot year. The queen is in there with her attendants. There's the sugar candy on the left side that needs to be eaten out by the worker bees in order to release her, which is why you also need to remember to remove that cork so that they can do that. There is a cork on the other side to let the queen out immediately, so make sure you choose the right side. The next step was to wrap the wire around the queen cage and suspend it for the Layens hive, and I simply just wrap the wire around it and then push it into the beeswax that I already had. I did have a lot of drawn out comb already from the prior hives and from the dead out, which is going to be a benefit for these bees as they get started. I then placed that frame inside of the Layens hive. I usually put it as frame 2. Next steps are to shake all those bees out of that bee box and into the bee hive itself that I'm using. And sometimes a little bit of gentle banging against the side of the beehive helps to get them out through that opening. I then place that in front of the entrance so the bees can get out the rest of the way. Here you can see they're already climbing up and swarming the queen cage, and it's time to close everything up, trying to be careful not to crush any of the bees. For the Layens hive this year, I'm having them start with 10 frames and then the follower board. Since it's drawn out comb, they will be a little bit ahead of the game in getting things started, so I think they can handle that from a hive defense standpoint. A good sign you want to see after you install your bees is fanning, where you have a worker bee fanning out the queen's pheromones out of their backside for calling in any straggler bees. The flow hive, or the Langstroth hive, was next, so I stapled a piece of wire to one of the frames in order to get ready for the queen, cracked open the bee box, and kind of repeated the procedure that I did with the Layens hive. The queen and some attendants running around in there. Now of note, you want to always make sure that if you have attendants in with your queen cage that you install it horizontally, because if you install it vertically, the attendants, if they were to die in the queen cage, they could plug up the hole and the queen won't be able to get out even after the sugar candy is eaten, so it's just a safety way to do it. Queen frame was ready to be placed back into the hive, and then it was time to shake in the bees. And then after shaking in all those bees, placing the empty box, or mostly empty box, in front of the hive so any straggler bees can climb out into the hive, and then it's a matter of filling it up with the rest of the frames. Since this hive is a little bit ahead of the game with resources because of leftovers from the dead out from last year, I decided to just go ahead and put the medium frames also on top of that, so it has the deep and the medium for the brood chamber. And then after that gets filled up with honey, it'll be time to put on any supers or flow frames as I'm going to use with this hive. I always do a slide technique for putting any of the different boxes on top of each other when it comes to a Langstroth hive in order to try to minimize any bee crushing. Next up is the top cover, and I also tend to cover the hole that's at the top that I use for ventilation with some screen that I just weigh down with rocks so the bees don't climb all through there, and then put the overall top roof on in order to have rain runoff and everything else. I do secure my Langstroth hive with a ratchet strap as a safety feature in case anything gets through my electric fence and just from wind. The big wide landing board on front of the Langstroth hive, you can see all of the butts sticking out where they're fanning all those pheromones out for this queen in order to bring in the other straggler bees. Moving on to the Layens hive for the third install, we had a little bit of drama on this one. Everything was going rather normally, opening up the bee box and getting the queen cage out. Where the problem came was the queen cage itself. As I was trying to pick out the cork, it was kind of stuck in there, and my dull tip on the hive tool wasn't enough to really grab it, and I cracked it.
Yeah, that's a problem.
My heart sank as I saw that pink dotted queen leave that queen cage and fly around above the hive. I quickly grabbed the bee box and just dumped the bees in, thinking, hey, maybe she'll say this is home and she'll know that this is the right place to go. I kept looking and looking, didn't see her, walked away, came back after about 10 minutes of closing up the hive, reopened it, and lo and behold, she did go into the hive. I really lucked out there. I closed everything up thinking I'm just going to leave them alone and hope for the best. I'm not going to try to catch her, grab her, and put her in another cage. Just kind of let it be.
So the risk of what happened right there where the queen cage broke and the queen got out, well, she could have flown up there into a tree and then probably everything would have swarmed up to her. It's a little bit tricky though because this queen has not been with these bees the entire life cycle of these bees. This queen did not raise these bees. When you get a package of bees, you get a whole bunch of bees that are worker bees, maybe a couple of drones make it in there too, and you get a queen that was raised separately. And the reason why the queen is in a separate cage inside of your overall package is so one, that you can put her into your hive and you know that she'll stay in the hive at least for a few days while the bees gradually eat that sugar candy to release her. Another reason why is because worker bees are pretty defensive on their hive against an invading queen or a queen of the wrong pheromones, and they will kill her. So that gives some time for some acclimation to be with the new queen for a little while with the new pheromones and get accustomed. It has a good chance of being okay because they were shipped together. They were probably been together for a few days at minimum, maybe even longer already. So it's probably going to be okay. And fortunately, the queen did go back down into this hive after the cage broke. So I got lucky there. But lesson learned, bring a knife in order to grab that cork a little bit easier probably. The hive tool might not have a sharp enough point to grab it easily, and I got a little too forceful. And probably have smoke handy. I probably should have had it. Sometimes when I'm doing installs, I don't bring it, but you don't need it unless you need it. And it's nice to have it if you do need it instead of to need it and not. But we got them all in there. Hopefully things will go okay. We'll check on it in the future.
After the installation, everything looked okay. The bees were going into the hive when I didn't even have the queen cage in there. So from a pheromone standpoint, queen was in there. They were calling in the other bees. Everything went well. And I did check on things a few days later, and everything has been going well so far. Got lucky. Got to be careful with those queen cages. If you like this video, remember to like and subscribe, please. And we'll see you next time at the Jerbee Apiary.